The evaluation period was scheduled to conclude with formal presentations to the Galactic Council, but fate had other plans. 3 days before the final presentations, Nexus Station experienced a catastrophic failure that would test every ship's capabilities. Under real emergency conditions, Zara was in her quarters, reviewing her evaluation reports when the station's emergency klaxons began blaring. The lights flickered and went out, replaced by the red glow of emergency illumination. Her communication system crackled to life with urgent announcements from Station Control. All vessels, this is Nexus Station Control declaring a code red emergency. We have experienced a cascade failure in our primary fusion reactor. Secondary systems are failing. All ships are advised to maintain safe distance and prepare for possible station evacuation. Zara made her way to the observation deck, where she found chaos. The various alien ships that had been docked for evaluation were hastily undocking and moving to safe distances from the station. The Verdani vessel had already withdrawn several thousand kilometers and was broadcasting offers to accept evacuees. The Korthek ship had positioned itself at maximum sensor range, its shields raised as a precaution against possible radiation exposure. Only one ship was moving toward the station instead of away from it. The Liberty was accelerating toward Nexus Station's damaged sections, its external lights blazing as Captain Morrison's voice cut through the emergency communications. Nexus Station Control, this is Captain Morrison of the Liberty. We're moving to assist with emergency repairs. Request permission to dock at Emergency Bay 7. Liberty negative on docking request. Station integrity is compromised. Radiation levels are approaching lethal limits. Maintain safe distance and prepare to accept evacuees. Station Control, we copy your radiation warnings. We're equipped for this type of emergency. Request permission to attempt reactor stabilization. Zara watched in amazement as the Liberty approached the station's most damaged section, where other ships feared to venture. The human vessel seemed unaffected by the radiation and debris that had forced every other ship to retreat to safe distances. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system again, now addressing all ships in the area. All vessels, this is the Liberty. We're going to attempt to stabilize the station's reactor system. We recommend you maintain current safe distances until we can assess the situation. Zara grabbed her emergency gear and made her way to the shuttle bay. As the station's chief evaluator, she needed to observe what the Liberty was attempting. She managed to get aboard one of the station's few remaining functional shuttles just as it launched to monitor the rescue operation from close range. What she witnessed over the next 6 hours challenged everything she thought she knew about Starship capabilities and crew competence. The Liberty docked directly with the station's damage section, connecting its hull to areas where radiation levels should have killed anyone who approached. Captain Morrison and his crew entered the station wearing environmental suits that looked crude compared to the sophisticated protection equipment used by other species. Yet they showed no signs of radiation exposure or environmental distress. The Liberty's crew worked with practiced efficiency in conditions that other species would have considered impossible. They moved through areas filled with toxic gases, operated equipment while exposed to lethal radiation levels, and performed complex repairs in zero gravity while debris continued to fall around them. Most remarkably, they seemed to treat these extreme conditions as merely challenging rather than life-threatening. Commander Kethvani, can you explain what we're observing? Lieutenant Vex's voice came through her suit communicator. The humans are working in an environment that should kill them within minutes. Zara watched Captain Morrison personally enter the station's reactor chamber, where the radiation levels were so high that her sensors couldn't provide accurate readings. Lieutenant, I think we're seeing what Captain Morrison meant when he said humans design their equipment, expecting everything to go wrong. The Liberty's crew had brought their own equipment to supplement the station's damaged systems. Zara realized that what she had thought were simple tools were actually sophisticated devices designed to operate in extreme environments. The humans weren't just prepared for this type of emergency, they were equipped for it as standard operating procedure. Captain Morrison emerged from the reactor chamber 4 hours later, his environmental suit apparently none the worse for exposure to radiation that would have fried the electronics in most species' equipment. His voice was calm as he reported to Station Control. Nexus Station Control, we've successfully stabilized your primary reactor. Secondary systems are coming back online now. Radiation levels should return to normal within the next 2 hours. But the emergency wasn't over. As the station's primary systems came back online, a new crisis emerged. The cascade failure had damaged the station's structural integrity, and several sections were beginning to separate from the main structure. What had been a power emergency was becoming a structural collapse that could destroy the entire station. The other alien ships, which had been preparing to assist with evacuation, found themselves unable to help with structural repairs. Their vessels weren't designed for the kind of heavy construction work needed to hold a space station together while it was coming apart. The Liberty's response was immediate. The human ship positioned itself between two separating sections of the station and extended what appeared to be mechanical arms from concealed positions in its hull. But these weren't just robotic manipulators. They were full-scale construction equipment capable of welding, cutting, and moving massive structural components. "Captain Morrison, what exactly is your ship doing?" Station Control asked as they watched the Liberty physically hold two sections of the station together while performing emergency structural repairs. "We're providing temporary structural support while we make permanent repairs. Standard emergency protocol for this type of situation." Zara realized that the Liberty wasn't just a survey ship equipped for emergencies. It was a complete mobile repair facility capable of rebuilding entire space installations. The humans had built their vessel to handle any conceivable emergency, including ones that other species had never considered possible. The rescue operation continued for another 8 hours, with the Liberty's crew working continuously in conditions that would have forced other species to retreat or call for specialized equipment. When it was finally over, Nexus Station was not only stable but actually more robust than it had been before the emergency. Captain Morrison's final report to Station Control was delivered with the same calm tone he had maintained throughout the crisis. "Nexus Station Control, emergency repairs are complete. Station integrity is now at 105% of original specifications. We've upgraded some of your structural connections while we were at it. Liberty is ready to resume normal evaluation procedures at your convenience." As the Liberty returned to its docking bay, Zara found herself staring at a ship that had completely redefined her understanding of what space vessels could be capable of. The humans hadn't just handled an emergency, they had thrived in it. What other species considered a catastrophe requiring immediate evacuation, the humans had treated as a routine maintenance problem. Lieutenant Vex approached her with his evaluation pad. "Commander, how do we classify what we just witnessed? The Liberty's performance doesn't fit any of our evaluation categories." Zara took the pad and began writing her final report. For the first time in 20 years, she found herself recommending immediate full membership and military alliance status for a species she had initially dismissed as primitive. But as she wrote, she realized something that troubled her about humanity's place in the galaxy. The Liberty's crew had handled the emergency with such casual competence that it was obvious they had dealt with similar situations many times before. The humans weren't just prepared for disasters, they expected them as a normal part of existence. "Lieutenant, I want you to research something for me. Find out what kind of disasters are common in human space. I want to know what they've been preparing for." The research results arrived the next day and confirmed Zara's growing suspicions. Human space was apparently filled with hazards that other species had never encountered. Stellar phenomena that could destroy entire solar systems, alien artifacts that posed existential threats, and cosmic events that occurred with disturbing regularity in human territory. In her final report to the Galactic Council, Zara wrote something she had never written before. "Immediate full membership recommended with urgent request for extended cultural exchange program." Humans possess survival capabilities and crisis management expertise that may be essential for long-term galactic security. But in her personal log, she recorded her real concerns. The humans build their ships to survive the end of the world because they apparently live in a universe where the world ends on a regular basis. They're not just prepared for disasters we can imagine, they're prepared for disasters we've never conceived of. The question that keeps me awake at night is simple. What do they know about the universe that we don't? And are we prepared for whatever it is they're getting ready to face? After the demonstration, Zara requested a private meeting with Captain Morrison to discuss what she had witnessed. They met in the Liberty's conference room, a space that continued the theme of excessive redundancy she had observed throughout the ship. The room had 3 independent communication systems, 2 separate life support connections, and what appeared to be emergency supplies stored behind panels in the walls. Captain Morrison, I need to understand the philosophy behind your ship's design. Every system appears to be built with the assumption that everything will fail catastrophically. Morrison settled into his chair and gestured toward a display screen that showed a 3-dimensional cutaway of the Liberty. Commander, let me tell you about Earth. Our homeworld isn't like most inhabited planets in the galaxy. Earth tried to kill us long before we ever reached space. The display changed to show images of Earth's surface. Massive storms that could level entire cities, earthquakes that could split continents, volcanic eruptions that could change the planet's climate for years, and weather patterns that could shift from deadly heat to killing cold within hours. We evolved on a world where the environment was actively hostile, ice ages that lasted thousands of years, meteor impacts that wiped out entire species, supervolcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. Humans learned early that the universe doesn't care about your survival, so you better care about it yourself. Zara studied the images of Earth's harsh conditions. Most species evolved on worlds with stable climates and predictable environments. The idea of developing intelligence while constantly facing extinction-level events was almost unthinkable. This explains your approach to redundancy, but not the extent of it. Your ship has backup systems for backup systems, and then additional backups beyond that. Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Commander, we've been through multiple near-extinction events in just the last few thousand years. Asteroid impacts, ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues that killed half our population. We learned that having one backup plan isn't enough, because the universe specializes in finding ways to break your backup plans. The display showed historical images of human disasters, cities destroyed by natural catastrophes, civilizations that had collapsed due to climate changes, and the remains of human settlements that had been abandoned when the environment became too hostile to support life. So we started building everything with the assumption that it would fail. Not might fail, would fail. The question wasn't whether our equipment would break down, but when and how badly and what we would do to keep going anyway. Zara began to understand the mindset that had created the Liberty. Most species built their technology to work perfectly under normal conditions, and added safety margins for unusual situations. Humans built their technology expecting disaster, and designed everything to continue functioning even when multiple catastrophic failures occurred simultaneously. Captain, this level of preparation seems excessive for space travel. Surely the risks in space are manageable with proper precautions. Morrison's expression became serious. Commander, space is trying to kill you in ways that make Earth look friendly. Vacuum that will boil your blood, radiation that will cook you from the inside, temperatures that range from absolute zero to stellar core heat, and debris moving at velocities that can vaporize entire ships. And that's just the easy stuff. He activated another display that showed human space exploration history. Unlike other species that had developed space travel gradually over centuries, humans had rushed into space with primitive technology and learned harsh lessons through direct experience. Our first space stations had life support failures that killed entire crews. Our early ships had reactor breaches that turned them into radioactive tombs. We lost explorers to equipment failures, navigation errors, and simple mechanical breakdowns that happened at the worst possible times. Every human space program is built on lessons learned from disasters that killed people we cared about. The display showed the remains of early human space installations, twisted metal debris floating in space, testament to the prices humans had paid while learning to survive in the hostile environment beyond their atmosphere. So we stopped trying to prevent failures and started planning for them instead. Every human ship carries enough spare parts to rebuild itself completely, enough supplies for twice the planned mission duration, and enough weapons and ammunition for wars we don't expect to fight. Zara realized that human engineering wasn't just paranoid, it was traumatized. Every system on the Liberty reflected hard-won knowledge purchased with human lives during the species' violent expansion into space. Captain, your ship's power systems intrigue me. You mentioned that the main reactor we observed was your cruising system. What exactly are your primary power systems capable of? Morrison hesitated for a moment. Commander, that gets into areas that might be classified as military information. But I can tell you that the Liberty can operate at current power levels for Approximately 50 years without refueling or major maintenance. 50 years of operation without resupply was beyond the capabilities of any ship Zara had evaluated. Most vessels required significant maintenance and refueling every few years at most. How is such endurance possible? We build our ships for extended independent operation because we assume we won't be able to get home. Every human vessel that leaves our solar system is equipped to establish permanent colonies if necessary, fight extended wars if required, or simply survive alone in space for decades if that's what it takes. Morrison activated a new display that showed the Liberty's internal structure in detail. What Zara had thought were storage compartments were actually manufacturing facilities. Areas she had assumed were crew quarters could be converted into workshops or laboratories. Sections that appeared to be simple hull space contained everything needed to build and maintain a small industrial base. The Liberty isn't just a survey ship, Commander. It's a complete civilization packed into a single hull. We can manufacture our own equipment, grow our own food, produce our own fuel, and train our own specialists. If we had to, we could operate independently for centuries. The implications were staggering. Every human ship was essentially a mobile colony, capable of surviving and thriving without any external support. No other species built vessels with this level of self-sufficiency. Captain, this capability goes far beyond what's necessary for exploration or even military operations. Why do humans feel the need for such extreme independence? Morrison was quiet for a long moment before answering. Commander, we've learned that when everything goes wrong, you can't count on anyone else to save you. Help might not come. Rescue might not be possible. Supply lines might be cut. Communication might fail. When that happens, you either save yourself or you die. But surely the galactic community provides support networks that make such preparations unnecessary. Does it? Morrison asked quietly. Commander, how long would it take for help to reach a ship in distress at the edge of known space? What happens when that help arrives and finds the situation is worse than expected? How many ships has the galactic community lost because they were waiting for rescue that came too late? Zara realized she didn't have good answers to those questions. The galactic community had established protocols for emergency assistance, but those protocols assumed that help would be available and effective when needed. We build our ships assuming that help won't come. Rescue won't be possible, and we'll have to solve our own problems with whatever we have on hand. If help does come, that's wonderful. If it doesn't, we're still alive and still capable. The conversation continued for another hour, with Morrison explaining human engineering philosophy in detail. Every design choice reflected lessons learned through catastrophic failures. Every system was built to continue operating when everything around it had broken down. Every capability was designed to function independently of external support. By the end of the discussion, Zara understood that she hadn't just encountered a different approach to technology. She had met a species that had learned to survive in a universe that other civilizations couldn't even imagine. The humans didn't just prepare for disasters. They expected them as a normal part of existence and built their entire civilization around the assumption that catastrophic failure was inevitable. For the first time in her career, Zara found herself wondering if other species had been building their ships wrong all along. The next morning brought the arrival of the human ship, and Zara's first reaction was exactly what she had expected: complete disappointment. The Liberty emerged from faster-than-light travel looking like someone had taken several different ships and welded them together without much concern for appearance. Where other vessels flowed with organic curves or displayed geometric perfection, the human craft was a collection of angular modules connected by what appeared to be external piping and structural supports. The observation deck filled with representatives from dozens of species, and Zara could hear the barely contained laughter as the Liberty moved toward the docking bay. The Verdani delegate made a comment about primitive construction techniques. The Korthek observer noted the complete lack of aesthetic consideration in the design. Even the usually polite Zephyrian representative seemed to be struggling not to comment on the ship's ungainly appearance. Lieutenant Vex stood beside Zara with his scanner active, taking preliminary readings of the human vessel. Commander, I'm getting some unusual power signatures. The energy output doesn't match what we expected from fusion reactors. Zara glanced at the scanner readings but didn't see anything that changed her initial assessment. Probably just inefficient power distribution. Primitive species often waste enormous amounts of energy because they haven't learned proper system integration. The Liberty docked with a series of mechanical clanks and hisses that echoed through the station's hull. Other ships docked silently, their advanced systems creating seamless connections with the station. The human ship sounded like it was held together with bolts and prayers, and everyone in the observation deck could hear every step of the docking procedure. Captain Jake Morrison appeared on the communication screen a few minutes later. He was a middle-aged human with graying hair and what appeared to be old scars on his face and hands. His uniform looked practical rather than ceremonial, with multiple pockets and tool attachments. When he spoke, his voice carried a confidence that seemed out of place given his ship's appearance. "Nexus Station Control. This is Captain Morrison of the Liberty. We're ready for the evaluation process whenever Commander Kethvani is prepared to come aboard." Zara made her way to the docking bay, expecting to find the cramped and poorly organized interior she had seen in preliminary scans of other human installations. Instead, when the airlock opened, she found herself looking at something that didn't match her preconceptions at all. The Liberty's interior was spacious and well organized, but what struck her immediately was the sheer number of systems that seemed to serve the same purpose. She counted 3 different power conduits running along the ceiling, where most ships would have one. The walls contained access panels every few meters, far more than seemed necessary for routine maintenance. Every critical system she could see had backup connections and secondary controls positioned nearby. Captain Morrison greeted her with a smile that suggested he was genuinely pleased to have visitors. "Welcome aboard the Liberty, Commander. I understand you're here to evaluate our technology for potential galactic membership." "That's correct, Captain. I'll need to examine your ship's primary systems, review your technical capabilities, and observe your crew's operational procedures. Based on your preliminary specifications, this should be a fairly straightforward process." Morrison's smile widened slightly. "Oh, I don't think there's anything straightforward about human engineering, Commander. We tend to do things a bit differently than other species." As they walked through the ship, Zara began to notice details that didn't fit her expectations. The hull construction that looked crude from the outside revealed itself to be surprisingly sophisticated when examined closely. The welded joints weren't signs of primitive manufacturing. They were deliberate design choices that allowed for field repairs using basic tools. The external piping she had dismissed as poor planning was actually a redundant system that could maintain ship operations even if the primary conduits were damaged. "Captain, your power systems are reading higher than expected for fusion reactors. Are these modified designs?" Morrison paused at a junction where several corridors met. "Well, Commander, that's where things get a bit complicated. See, we learned early in our space program that reactors have this unfortunate tendency to break down at the worst possible moments. So we don't really rely on just one reactor." He led her to an observation window that looked into the ship's engineering section. What Zara saw made her stop and stare. Instead of the single large reactor she expected, the Liberty contained 7 smaller reactors arranged in a complex pattern. Each one appeared to be operating independently, and she could see that several were currently offline while others handled the ship's power needs. 7 reactors seems excessive for a ship this size," Zara commented, trying to understand the reasoning behind the design. "Actually, we can run the entire ship on any 2 of them," Morrison explained. 3 of them are currently handling normal operations. 2 are on standby and 2 are offline for routine maintenance. If we lose the 3 that are running, the standby units automatically come online. If we lose those, we can bring the maintenance units back into service in about 10 minutes. Zara studied the engineering display more carefully. The power management system was far more complex than anything she had expected from a supposedly primitive species. The humans weren't just providing backup power. They were running multiple independent power grids throughout their ship. "What happens if you lose more than 5 reactors?" she asked. Morrison's expression became serious. "Commander, if we lose 5 reactors, we're probably dealing with a situation where the ship is coming apart around us. But even then, the remaining 2 reactors can maintain life support and basic systems for the entire crew complement for about 6 months." They continued the tour, and every system Zara examined revealed the same philosophy. The Liberty didn't just have backup systems, it had backups for the backups, and then additional backups for situations where the first backups failed. The navigation system could operate using 5 different types of sensors. The communication array had 7 independent transmitters. The life support system was actually 3 separate systems that could operate independently or work together. Captain Morrison, this level of redundancy seems excessive. What kind of operational environment were you expecting when you designed this ship? Morrison stopped walking and turned to face her directly. Commander, we designed this ship expecting that everything would go wrong at the worst possible time. We've learned that space is actively trying to kill you, and the universe has a sense of humor about timing. So we build everything assuming that Murphy's Law isn't just a guideline. It's a fundamental force of nature. Zara had never encountered a species that approached engineering from the perspective of expecting failure. Most civilizations built their ships to work perfectly under ideal conditions and added minimal backup systems for emergencies. The humans seem to have started with the assumption that nothing would work as planned and built accordingly. This is highly unusual, Captain. Most species design their ships for optimal performance under normal conditions. Normal conditions, Morrison repeated with a slight laugh. Commander, in our experience, there's no such thing as normal conditions in space. There are brief moments of relative calm between disasters, and if you're not prepared for the disasters, the calm periods don't matter much. As they reached the bridge, Zara realized that her preliminary assessment had been completely wrong. The Liberty wasn't primitive, it was paranoid. Every design choice reflected a species that had learned to expect catastrophic failure and had developed technology to continue operating when everything went wrong. It wasn't elegant or efficient by conventional standards, but it was something she had never encountered before. A ship designed to survive rather than simply perform. The bridge itself reinforced this impression. Every station had manual backup controls. The main display screens were supplemented by smaller displays that could take over if the primaries failed. Even the chairs appeared to be equipped with independent life support systems. Captain, I need to ask you something directly. Is the Liberty representative of standard human technology, or is this a specially modified vessel? Morrison settled into his command chair and gestured for Zara to take the observer's seat. Commander, the Liberty is absolutely standard for human deep space vessels. If anything, she's a bit less robust than our military ships. We built her for survey work, so she doesn't need quite the same level of survivability as a ship expected to go into combat. For the first time in her 20-year career, Commander Zara Kethavani found herself looking at a ship that didn't fit into any category she understood. The formal evaluation phase began 3 hours later in the testing zone, a section of space near Nexus Station, equipped with monitoring equipment and safety systems. Zara had observed hundreds of these demonstrations, and they typically followed predictable patterns. Each species would showcase their ship's primary capabilities, demonstrate their weapon systems under controlled conditions, and perform a series of standardized maneuvers to test their vessel's performance limits. The Verdani ship went first, as was traditional for bioships. The organic vessel flowed through the test course like a living creature, its hull rippling and changing shape to optimize its movement through space. When faced with simulated asteroid fields, the ship's living metal surface absorbed impacts and healed itself within seconds. The weapons demonstration showed bioenergy cannons that could adapt their frequency to penetrate different types of armor. It was impressive technology, but Zara had seen similar capabilities from other bioships. The Korthek vessel followed with a display of geometric precision that left the other observers murmuring in admiration. The crystalline ship moved through complex maneuvers with mathematical accuracy, its surface reflecting light in patterns that created temporary optical illusions. Its energy weapons carved through target drones with surgical precision, and its shield system deflected incoming fire so efficiently that the ship barely needed to maneuver to avoid damage. The Zephyrian ship's demonstration focused on energy manipulation, phasing in and out of visible spectrum while maintaining full functionality. The Taraxian vessel showed off its mechanical adaptability, extending various appendages to perform multiple tasks simultaneously, while maintaining combat effectiveness. Each demonstration followed the same basic script: show maximum performance under ideal conditions, demonstrate primary capabilities, and avoid any situations that might reveal limitations or weaknesses. The evaluating species wanted to present their best possible appearance to the Galactic Council. When the Liberty's turn arrived, Captain Morrison requested permission to conduct what he called standard human operational protocols. Zara expected another routine demonstration, but Morrison's first action was to deliberately shut down his ship's main reactor. The Liberty went dark for approximately 30 seconds, while emergency lighting kicked in throughout the ship. Then, to Zara's amazement, the ship came back online with all systems functioning at full capacity. The power readings on her instruments showed the Liberty was now operating on backup systems that somehow provided more energy than the main reactor had been generating. Captain Morrison, your ship appears to be running at 110% of previous power levels using backup systems. How is this possible? Morrison's voice came through the communication system with what sounded like amusement. Commander, those weren't backup systems. Those were the systems we use when we expect trouble. The reactor we shut down was our cruising power plant. We save the real power systems for when we need them. The next phase of testing involved simulated combat damage. The testing drones began targeting the Liberty with energy weapons designed to create hull breaches and system failures. Zara watched in disbelief as the human ship absorbed hit after hit without apparent concern. Where other ships would maneuver to avoid damage or rely on shields to deflect incoming fire, the Liberty simply accepted the punishment and continued operating. When the weapons fire finally managed to breach the Liberty's hull in several locations, Zara expected to see the standard emergency response: seal the breaches, reroute around damaged systems, and withdraw from combat to make repairs. Instead, the Liberty's response was unlike anything she had ever observed. The ship didn't just seal the hull breaches, it rerouted entire sections of the ship around the damage. Corridors that had been destroyed were replaced by alternate passages that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Systems that should have been offline came back online using connections that hadn't existed moments before. The Liberty was rebuilding its internal structure in real time while continuing to fight. Captain, your ship appears to be reconfiguring its internal layout. Is this some kind of advanced manufacturing technology? Not exactly, Commander. It's more like we build our ships with a lot more internal space than we actually need, and we don't always use the same corridors and connections. When something gets broken, we just use a different route. Every human ship is basically several ships built inside the same hull. The combat simulation intensified, with multiple drones attacking the Liberty simultaneously. Zara expected the human ship to be overwhelmed, but Morrison's response was to request combat overrides from Nexus Station Control. Permission was granted for the Liberty to operate beyond normal safety parameters. What happened next defied everything Zara thought she knew about starship operations. The Liberty's power output suddenly tripled, sending her instruments into ranges she hadn't known were possible. The ship's weapons fire increased dramatically in both frequency and intensity. Its maneuverability became impossibly agile for a vessel of its size. Warning klaxons could be heard through the communication system as automated voices announced critical system failures that the ship somehow ignored. The Liberty tore through the combat drones like they were stationary targets. Its weapons systems, which had appeared basic during the initial evaluation, revealed hidden capabilities that activated only under extreme conditions. Energy weapons emerged from concealed positions throughout the hull. Missile launchers deployed from sections that had appeared to be simple storage compartments. Even the ship's engines seemed to multiply as additional thrusters extended from the hull. Captain Morrison, your ship is now operating at over 300% of its rated capacity, while multiple critical systems are reporting failure. How is this possible? Morrison's reply came through communication channels that were crackling with interference from the Liberty's massive power output. Commander, 300% of rated capacity is what we call a Tuesday. We rate our ships for continuous safe operation, not for what they can actually do when we need them to perform. The demonstration reached its climax when the Liberty faced a scenario designed to test ultimate survival capabilities. The testing drones created a situation that simulated catastrophic engine failure, massive hull damage, life support system breakdown, and main computer failure, all occurring simultaneously. This was typically the point where ships would declare emergency conditions and request immediate assistance. The Liberty's response was to continue fighting while its crew calmly began what they called emergency protocols. Zara watched in fascination as the human ship operated with over half its systems officially offline, using backup systems that somehow performed better than the original equipment. The ship's crew worked with practiced efficiency, as if operating under these conditions was routine rather than emergency procedure. Captain, your crew seems remarkably calm considering the extent of your ship's damage. Damage? Morrison sounded genuinely puzzled. Commander, we're barely into yellow alert status. Red alert is when things get interesting. The testing phase concluded, with the Liberty having passed every simulation while operating, under conditions that would have destroyed or disabled any other ship in the evaluation. The human vessel had demonstrated capabilities that seemed to violate basic principles of engineering and physics. It had absorbed damage that should have been fatal, operated with power systems that exceeded their rated capacity by impossible margins, and maintained full combat effectiveness while running on backup systems that outperformed most ships' primary equipment. As the Liberty returned to normal operations, Zara realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. The human ship hadn't just performed well in the tests. It had revealed that the tests themselves were inadequate to evaluate human technology. Every simulation had been designed around the assumption that ships operated within reasonable safety margins and tried to avoid damage when possible. The humans had built a ship that thrived under conditions other species considered catastrophic. They hadn't just passed the evaluation, they had demonstrated that they were playing an entirely different game with completely different rules. For the first time in her career, Zara found herself looking at a ship that truly impressed her, and the feeling was both exhilarating and deeply unsettling. Captain Morrison, I have just one more question. You mentioned that the Liberty is not a military vessel. Exactly what kind of ship would humans send if they wanted to demonstrate their military capabilities? The pause before Morrison answered was long enough to make Zara wonder if the communication system had failed. When he finally responded, his voice carried a tone she hadn't heard before. Commander, that's probably not a question you want me to answer while we're docked at a peaceful research station. Commander Zara Kethavani stood at the massive viewing window of Nexus Station and watched another ship dock at the evaluation bay. The sleek vessel moved like a living thing through space, its biometal hull shifting and flowing as it adjusted to the docking procedure. She had seen this design before. A Verdani collective cruiser, grown rather than built, capable of healing its own wounds and adapting to any environment. The other evaluators around her whispered in amazement at the organic beauty of the craft, but Zara felt nothing except mild boredom. She turned away from the window and walked back to her evaluation station. The datapad in her hands contained the technical specifications of the Verdani ship, but she already knew what she would find. Impressive biotechnology, yes, but predictable in its limitations. The living ships were powerful but slow to adapt to completely new situations. They excelled in familiar environments but struggled when faced with truly alien conditions. Zara had evaluated dozens of similar vessels over her 20-year career, and each one followed the same patterns. Commander Kethavani, the Korthek delegation has arrived, announced Lieutenant Vex, her assistant for this evaluation cycle. The young officer's excitement was obvious in his voice, but Zara simply nodded and made a note on her datapad. The Korthek Empire ship appeared on the viewing screens as it approached the station. It was a masterpiece of geometric precision, its crystalline hull reflecting the light from Nexus Station's powerful illuminators. The ship looked like a giant jewel floating through space, every surface perfectly cut and polished. Its weapon systems were integrated so smoothly into the hull that they were almost invisible until activated. The Korthek had perfected the art of making their ships both beautiful and deadly. Zara watched the crystalline vessel dock with practiced ease. She had evaluated 3 Korthek ships in the past 5 years, each one more advanced than the last. Their technology was impressive. Energy weapons that could punch through any known armor, shields that could deflect almost any attack, and power systems that seemed to violate several laws of physics. Yet even these marvels failed to stir any real interest in her. The Korthek always built the same way, pursuing maximum efficiency and perfect performance. Their ships were wonderful examples of engineering excellence, but they lacked anything truly surprising. The day continued with arrivals from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Confederacy sent a ship that seemed to be made of pure light, its hull appearing solid but actually composed of contained energy fields. The Taraxian Republic's contribution looked like a massive mechanical spider, with dozens of articulated arms and sensors extending from its central body. Each ship represented the pinnacle of its species' technological achievement, and each ship left Zara feeling the same sense of professional disappointment. She had earned her reputation as the galaxy's most discerning ship evaluator precisely because nothing impressed her anymore. The Galactic Council valued her opinion because she could see past the flashy exterior displays and identify the real capabilities and limitations of any vessel. Her reports were used to determine which species deserved full membership in the galactic community, which ones needed more time to develop their technology, and which ones posed potential threats that needed to be monitored. But the job had become routine. Every species followed predictable patterns in their ship design. The Verdani always chose biological solutions. The Korthek always pursued geometric perfection and maximum efficiency. The Zephyrians always tried to push the boundaries of energy manipulation. The Taraxians always built ships that looked like giant mechanical creatures. After 2 decades of evaluating ships, Zara could predict a vessel's capabilities just by looking at which species built it. Lieutenant Vex approached her station with another datapad. "Commander, the final ship for this evaluation cycle will arrive tomorrow morning. The delegation from the species calling themselves humans." Zara took the datapad and glanced at the preliminary information. Her expression showed mild interest for the first time all day, but not the kind that suggested she expected to be impressed. The humans were a newly discovered species from a backwater system near the galaxy's outer rim. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last 50 years, making them practically primitives compared to the other species being evaluated. The technical data on human ships was laughably basic. Chemical rockets for atmospheric flight, crude fusion reactors for power, and hulls that appeared to be made of welded metal plates. Their weapons were simple projectile systems and basic energy weapons that other species had abandoned centuries ago. Their ships looked like they had been assembled in orbital shipyards rather than grown, printed, or manifested through advanced manufacturing techniques. "What do we know about their evaluation ship?" Zara asked, scrolling through the limited information available. "It's called the Liberty, commanded by someone named Captain Jake Morrison. According to the preliminary scans, it appears to be a survey vessel rather than a military ship. The humans claim it represents their standard technology level." Zara almost smiled at that. Most species sent their most advanced military vessels for evaluation, hoping to impress the Council with their deadliest capabilities. If the humans were sending a survey ship, they were either remarkably honest about their limitations or completely naive about the evaluation process. She spent the rest of the day reviewing what little information was available about human technology and society. They came from a planet called Earth, a world that seemed unremarkable except for its slightly higher gravity and more extreme weather patterns than most inhabited worlds. Their society appeared to be a collection of competing nation-states that had somehow managed to work together long enough to develop space travel. Their technology was entirely mechanical and electronic. No biointegration, no crystal matrices, no energy field manipulation, no dimensional folding techniques. Everything about the humans suggested they would provide the most boring evaluation of her career. Zara began mentally composing her report before she had even seen their ship. She would note their enthusiasm and potential for future development, recommend they be allowed to continue their technological advancement under galactic observation, and suggest they reapply for membership in perhaps 100 years when they had developed something more impressive than welded metal ships powered by fusion reactors. As she prepared to leave her station for the day, Zara looked out the viewing window one more time. The various alien ships docked at the evaluation bays represented billions of years of combined technological evolution. Each species had taken their own unique path to the stars, developing solutions that reflected their biology, their environment, and their cultural values. Tomorrow she would see how the humans had solved the challenges of space travel, and she was confident it would be the most predictable evaluation she had ever conducted. Little did she know that her 20-year career of never being impressed was about to come to a dramatic end.